Welcome to another 21 Hats Dashboard brought to you by Grasshopper Bank. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman, and I'm here with Alan Pentz, who has been a guest here several times and whose writing I frequently highlight in the morning report. Alan is the founder of Corner Alliance, a government contracting business. He stepped back from that business to start Owner RX, which has been training business owners in how to use AI. And he has a brand new company called rustproof.ai. Oh, Alan, welcome, and tell us what rustproof is.
Yes, I still own a company. They're running the government contractor. I stepped down a couple of years ago now. And originally wasn't really focused on AI, but very quick, I was doing some business coaching and kind of thinking through how to grow small businesses. And so over time, though, AI really became central for me. And I went way down the rabbit hole, and then I had not seen the sun since. So I started an RX kind of first for coaching, kind of evolved into training owners on AI. I'm still doing a little bit of that. But out of my journey, I kind of came to this conclusion, which I think we'll talk about toward the end, that AI is not going to be necessarily just a training issue. I'm not going to train someone and they're going to go do AI at their company. There's so many components to it that it really requires companies, a new kind of company to emerge, or old companies to morph to help manage the deployment and running of AI day to day for any business. You're seeing this already at the top level with OpenAI, Anthropic, Microsoft. All of them have started essentially consulting firms that are helping companies deploy and manage the AI. And that's where we're going. So my take was, that's a much more powerful thing, especially for small business, when you really niche down to a specific vertical and you can kind of share lessons across. And so we picked trade associations. I live outside of DC, so we're here bankrupting our country. So we might as well make a little money off of it, right? And no, trade associations are great. They represent, all of our interests. And so we like that as a nice narrow market. Probably isn't going to attract venture capital, so the competition is going to be lower. It's a high referral market, right? They all know each other and not particularly tech savvy. So we're kind of bringing, like anything we do is kind of magic, right? So that's sort of why that's where I got to. And so I should kind of transferred from main Owner RX to this a couple months ago.
So Alan, I've been reading quite a few stories lately about how the cost of using AI is taking some businesses by surprise. There's some, kind of minor horror stories about it. Granted, most of those businesses have been corporations, many of which have been demanding that their employees use AI for anything and everything, right, and are now surprised by what that costs. But I've also started seeing more stories citing small businesses examples. Have you seen that as well?
No, I think actually the problem in the small business side is they're not spending enough. So where you're seeing the stories, it's really the nature of the activity. So it's around coding. So people who are coding things are spending a lot of money on AI, and most small businesses aren't doing it. So we're kind of at this Uber moment, back in the 2010s when Uber subsidized every ride, right? And you're going somewhere for $10 and that ride now is $25, whatever. That's what's happening right now for individual users of AI. So like at my company, we've got 4 people now. We're all using individual accounts with Anthropic and with OpenAI. I use both every day. So I have Codex and Claude Code open all the time. Codex being OpenAI's product. And get, their $20 a month subscriptions. Those really, to be honest, aren't great because they kick you out of the top models very quickly. But the $100 and $200 levels are heavily subsidized. So I'm using them day to day.
If they heavily subsidized, you just mean they're not charging what it costs them to run it.
Yeah. So I run out of tokens on the $200 plan on both every month. I'm probably spending $4,000 to $5,000 worth of tokens for $200 on each. So I'm probably spending $4,000 to $10,000 a month in actual
You're not
tokens.
Spending it, you're using that much.
I'm using that amount. The ironic thing is this is great for small business, But once you scale to a corporate level and you have a bunch of developers and people using it, you need to manage that across multiple people. They need to be able to, you want to share and budget tokens. You also want to keep track of what they're coding. And ironically, when you move to the enterprise plan, very quickly, I mean, they're doing individual deals too. So some people get discounts, blah, blah, blah. But you're paying per token essentially at the enterprise level. So enterprise is less, the big companies are less subsidized than the small companies. Now, even that's starting to come to an end. So we just saw the first moves in that game this week with Fable from Anthropic. So I'm going to describe that likewise. Yeah. So Fable was the first, this model that the government pulled back. Great model, super powerful, and costs a lot to use. So it's probably double. I think like the cost to Anthropic to run it is double what it is to run the next model below, which is Opus 4.8. This is called Fable 5. So that came back July 1st or 2nd, something like that. The government decided with some additional safeguards, we'll let it go out. I immediately jumped on top of it. I was like, someone said when it came out, they felt like they'd been given fire and then it was taken away from them, right? And OpenAI has a model 5.6, GPT 5.6 coming out, I think next week. That's the rumor. But anyway, those models cost a lot more to run. They take a lot of tokens. And Anthropic kind of drew first blood on saying, hey, when Fable came back, they gave you 7 days. You could use half of your subscription token. So, so you get 1 million tokens. I don't know what it is. You can use 500,000 of them on Fable. By the way, Fable burns through tokens so quickly, right? But you can only do that for a week. And then suppose that ends today, July 7th. Supposedly tomorrow, you have to pay per token. And so they moved it out of the subscription. So that's the first time we've seen the subscription not get subsidized to that level. We'll see now when 5.6 comes out next week from OpenAI. They're behind Anthropic right now, right? Especially for my kind of user, business, coding. Are they going to keep it in the plan, in the subsidized plan? And I bet you, if they do, you're going to see tons of people move back over to OpenAI because it's just so much cheaper, right? To be subsidized, right? You get the subsidy or you pay, right? So now you're starting to see, as a result of Anthropic moving Fable out, the costs are going up. The enterprise plans aren't subsidized the way these subscription plans are. You're starting to see people saying like, hey, I can't, if I'm going to do this at scale with thousands of people, I cannot be spending, people are talking about significant percentages of highly paid engineer salaries going to their tokens. So it's like I make $250K and I'm spending 50,000 in tokens a year. So you start thinking about it, they're going to start looking at a developer as a salary plus tokens. And you might even get allocated tokens based on your level.
Well, let's take a couple of steps back for a moment. Could you just give us a quick explanation of how the token system works, maybe that a 5-year-old could understand?
Yeah, it's just like a unit of measure of compute time, right?
It's like a utility, like paying for electricity.
Yeah, electricity. It's like a token is essentially like a part of a word. It's probably like 2 or 3 letters, something like that.
That's small.
And then they're doing these calculations with a token to say, given all the tokens around this token, what's the next most likely set of letters or numbers that would come after it? Doing this massive, 5-dimensional search through all the math that they've related all these words together through the training, right? So it's essentially just like a big probabilistic engine that's saying, hey, based on all the books and podcasts we read, when I see THE and I see these 50 other words around THE, I know that cat's the next word. That's all. And a token is cat, right? So you're paying per sort of like word that's going through the system, roughly, right? So this brings up a whole bunch of stuff, which is like, how many tokens does the LLM actually need to use? And like, is Anthropic and OpenAI in a lot of ways are incentivized to make their models not very. And a lot of times, a better answer comes from more thinking, right? And so they're kind of pushing that as the most capable model is thinking more. That means it's using more tokens, which, oh, by the way, is great for their business because they sell it by the token.
Can you track your token usage? Do you know where you stand?
So you can click in a Claude code app down. If you're in code, you can click down on this little wheel that what model you're on, and it'll show you a little bit of information. You go into settings, there's some information. So you can get a rough idea of what you're doing and what percentage of your subscription you're using. But I think you're starting to see, like, out there, these companies that they're routing and monitoring the tokens through not using the subscription. They're using just the regular API that's open. There are third-party companies coming in because, like, who's going to trust OpenAI to tell them exactly what happened and then to help them figure out, is this the most efficient use of this? And then you got to start thinking, like, now people are like, oh, let's go to these open source models, mostly Chinese, right? So these models, what they're doing, I mean, this whole sector is insane. All they're doing is hitting Anthropic's and OpenAI's APIs from like all these different servers all over the world that they own, obviously incurring massive cost to take their model and say, what answer would Anthropic give me? And then I encode those answers. So they're essentially massively stealing IP from OpenAI and Anthropic in this distributed way.
Which kind of seems fair in a way because that's how.
Because they stole their stuff, right? But of course, if you're the funding Anthropic, you don't feel like that, right? So they're basically taking all that and creating a version of Anthropic and OpenAI that they serve up. So the big one that just came out was from this company I think it's Z.AI. It's called GLM 5.2 or whatever. All these things are nonsense. And it's open source. So you can if you have a big enough computer, like if you had an Apple, I can't remember their high-end computer name, you can download it to that and operate it yourself, right? It's just the cost of the electricity that you run into the computer. So but you got to figure, like, dude, that's not a business model to like do these massive API calls, which cost a ton of money, to then create an open source product that maybe you make a little bit of money from like hosting it, but like most companies aren't going to use the Chinese version. So they don't want to send data to China. So like this is obviously just subsidized by the Chinese to try to keep up because there's no business model in that. That's ridiculous. So like anyone who actually does the training themselves, they're going to close the model because it's so expensive to create it.
Okay, so back to the potential expense for a smaller business. Some of the stories that I read suggested that it's not just coding. They talked about, if you've set up a bunch of agents and you on this podcast, you've talked about helping, one of our business owners, Jackie Russo, set up agents to help her, find leads and vet them and reach out to them. All this happening automatically. If you're just doing that kind of thing with agents, which quite a few small businesses have gotten to that stage, is there a potential to run up a bill unexpectedly?
No, unless Jackie's going to reach out to 50,000 people a day, I don't think that she's going to see a real bill. And the other thing that's happening is people are using these desktop solutions like Claude to work. And then Codex is sort of a version of that for OpenAI. And you're using your subscription to run the agent in that usually. So you're not going to the raw API to run it. And so you're getting that subsidy by doing that. Now, eventually, if they remove that subsidy, the cost could go up, but I think you're talking hundreds of dollars. I think the problem is small business is not implementing AI at any kind of scale. because it's not there yet. And anyone who is kind of doing it themselves with a small team. I do.
They're not into doing it at scale. Why?
Because they don't know how to. Right.
Okay.
And then the people who use Cowork like we trained, or use Claude Code and Codex like I do, they're living off this subscription. So like if I'm building like multiple agents for our clients and internal agents to like run our business. Now, if they get rid of the subscription and I have to pay for that, I'm going to immediately go to this routing and start using the open source models and just use the top models for planning and review. There's a whole class of companies right now, and this is only for enterprises, right? Because that's who you do this for first, that are setting up essentially like development environments that efficiently route tasks to models based on their complexity. And then, they can send something to an open source model that it doesn't isn't that sophisticated. I got to look at this transcript, right? I can send that to the cheapest open source model. Or I'm going to plan this major new software program that's going to run my company. I'm going to go pay for Fable tokens or 5.6 tokens, right? But then I'm going to have it implemented by GLM 5.2. And there's companies that are building the environments that like make that very easy to do. But I mean, we're talking like these have been around for 6 weeks, but this is new. So most people are just, if a small business owner is using a lot of AI, they're basically doing what I'm doing and using the subsidy. And most of them just aren't doing much at all except searching ChatGPT still.
It's going to change that.
So, companies like Rustproof. So, my firm conclusion was even what I was doing with owners and still doing trading on Cowork, there's a certain amount of difference that can make for an owner. But the problem is it's very hard to scale to a company, even a 15, 25 person team. And really what you're seeing is that like Lauren, you did this and Claude Cowork. Okay. There's a model that you're using. There's a number of tokens. There's like, oh, I'm running out of tokens. Then should I be using the Sonnet model or the Opus model? Oh, wait, Fable showed up. What should I do with that? Like, how is that going to be the user's problem? Then it's like, hey, I built a bunch of skills, but they're on my local machine. How do I share them with people, right?
Just to be clear, most small business owners who are playing with this now don't really have to worry about which model they're on. They're paying the monthly fee. The only reason that would become an issue is if they run through all their tokens the way you do, which is unlikely for most business owners.
No, I mean, I would say for a month, it's an issue. Automatically, if you're on the $100, $200, they're defaulting you to better models, so it's not as much of an issue. But yeah, you'll notice, like if you use Cowork, it'll put you on Sonnet all the time, which is a lower grade model. And so it doesn't intelligently route you to a better model. Oh, I'm planning what I'm going to do with 21 hats in the future. I don't want some crappy model that just reads my transcript, right? I want tokens. I want it to think. And if you think about it, like, think about tokens as effort. Like, do you want this thing to make effort or not? No. And obviously, they're not really routing you smartly. And they're doing it completely based on their own interests. And at $20 a month, they don't really care about you that much. They're just trying to get you addicted. And they're, so my take is there's a whole bunch of scaling problems with these products. One of them being tokens, models. You create workflows, right? And we talked about that with skills. A skill is like a documented workflow that gives instructions to the Claude Cowork or Claude Code to go do this in this order, right? Skill is just like a written out SOP. But there's no way to like share those if you get on the Teams plan, which by the way, then you don't get the subsidy. There's a way to share them, but then they're not role based. And look, they're going to build some of that in over time. But then no, Anthropic's got interests that are just to get you to consume more, not to help you actually get the outcome at the lowest cost. So you're going to need a company that comes in and manages that.
So if somebody right now is using the $20 a month subscription model, a CEO, an owner using it to maybe throwing in resumes when making a job decision, asking it to create the job description, maybe running finances through it, P&Ls, what am I missing in my P&L, that kind of thing. My sense is most owners doing that aren't paying a lot of attention to which model they're actually using. They're
That's right.
using it the way they used Google. Should they be paying attention to what model they're using?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, for the basic day-to-day stuff, probably doesn't matter that much. But like, yeah, you're talking about planning your future. You're looking at planning out maybe, oh, should I build a little software thing that can help me do this? Your finances, I would be using the top model, and you're going to run out of tokens on that faster. And by the way, they can change that every day if they want. There's no way for you to tell what's happening. So like, if I were an owner paying $20 a month, I'd tell you should be an owner paying $100 a month, because you are getting like an insane subsidy and you're not taking it. So like, you should be paying $100 or $200 a month for one of these. And then you don't really have to worry about it, because you're basically on the top model all the time. And the chances that you're going to run out of those tokens, at least as the world exists today, is low. So I would just say pay the $100 or $200, ride that as long as you possibly can. And like, the other thing you're going to have to keep, sucks, but you're going to have to keep an eye on is like, if OpenAI on Codex really does start giving you top models for less, which I think is distinctly possible given it is behind significantly and it needs to catch up, then you might need to switch, because the intelligence is going to be a lot cheaper there. That's just a reality, right? So, and both, by the way, both of these companies need to IPO in the next year. So they've got incentives that go past you, right?
And they've lost tons and tons of money that they have to try to make up at some point. What is this going to look like when they start trying to make money?
Anthropic drew first blood, right? I think the long term is going to be companies in each vertical using there's going to be a bunch of software solutions to this too, that help set up like basically build you a company brain that you build a bunch of workflows, skills, agents, whatever you want to call them, on top of. And they're working with you month to month, much like your managed service provider for IT security. Pay a subscription. They're managing the tokens and the models in the background for you, and basically selling you the outcomes of the AI. I think that's probably where we're going. Eventually, big companies might do that for themselves, but I mean, getting the people that know that and staying on top of the model changes, that's crazy. So I think what you're going to find is like the one really interesting thing I think it's worth going into is I wrote a piece about Fable, and like, if you stick Fable, the new expensive Anthropic model, on a task to build a small feature, for like one of our clients, it will charge you 5 times as much and do the exact same work that a much cheaper model will do. It's not like it redefines what an email send is or like what a button does, right? But if you give it, hey, I have not figured out how to make this business do this, and here's all this messy data and spreadsheets I have, and then it's like, oh my God, you've seen the light, right? This thing can think through gnarly, complex problems like nothing I've ever seen before.
Hey, can you give us an example? What kind of problem you have in mind?
So like, I'll give it like, I'm running like 4 things internally for Rustbridge. So we have like where our clients and agents are, our monitoring system for those agents, our internal system. There's a bunch of moving parts to it, right? And I'm like, this system is not working right now for these reasons, right? And I go read all the repos, tell me what's happening. And it comes back and it's like, here are the 4 things.
Wait, what's a repo?
So like Salesforce has a repo where Salesforce code sets repository in GitHub terminology. So basically, or I could take it and be like, here's, say I'm a finance person, and I have a bunch of clients, and I give them 10 years of financial records of 100 clients and tell it to tell me what it thinks. it will find insights that you've never heard before. And actually, at this point, they're saying don't restrict the model too much when you make queries. Remember how we always talked about prompt really well, do all this stuff, right? That's kind of fallen apart because the model's so smart. If you restrict it, it will listen to you and then not give you its best effort, right? So like you want to give it big, open-ended, messy prompts. Like, what should I do with this entire code base? This is years of data on all the sales we've made. Like, what is the problem and why can't we grow? That's the kind of stuff that you give to Fable. And I think there's an unlimited appetite for that. But it's just, you're not going to spend it to like on your website. It's like I said, it's like hiring a PhD to do a TikTok, or a physics PhD in astrophysics to help you do a TikTok video. Probably, but I don't think that's the best use of his brain power, right? His tokens, your brain power is just a bunch of tokens too. Think of it as effort. He'd be on these big, problems. And I think there's an infinite appetite for that. It's just not going to be when you use day to day for like, getting your leads that you're going to send out, right? So you're going to have other models coordinated with it. And someone needs to manage that for you.
You're saying that all the time we've put into understanding the best way to ask prompts will no longer be necessary as we move to better and better AI models.
Not true. So you're going to need Fable to then tell you the prompts to tell the stupid models how to do their job.
Okay.
Right? But it's too expensive to just put Fable on every problem. So, and then, this is just going to keep climbing the ladder.
I think I'm still right. You still don't have to know how to prompt, because you want to ask the big open-ended question of Fable, and then you ask Fable, all right, what are the prompts I should use with the other models?
Exactly.
So
that's true.
I still don't have to be an expert in prompting.
Yeah, but you're going to have to be able to deploy that to each system. And you're going to have to be able to like have the wherewithal every time it changes to go do it all over again, right? And so it's not like you couldn't do it, sure. But are you gonna put 3 people in your company full time on doing that? Probably not.
Alan, you started out with Owner RX. The idea obviously was you were going to train owners how to seize this opportunity and use AI, perhaps to survive, or better to build, a far more successful business than they might otherwise have ever dreamed of. At some point, you realized that this doesn't work teaching owners how to do it. It's too complex, and they're going to have to hire someone to do it for them. When did you realize that?
I think I kind of got that in the 3rd cohort earlier this year, as I realized, like, I thought if I could get people to know what GitHub was and download Node.js on their computer so they could execute commands, that they would then figure out how to Claude code like I do. And that was not true. So Claude coding is easier than it's ever been. I mean, how many people are out there building systems right now? Almost none. And like, then I also realized, even beyond that, I had the luxury of like hiring a CEO in my own company and stepping down and having the time. So even some of the people I trained who had built stuff and are really good just don't have the time. And I saw that even I'm working with my old company, that I stepped down from, on helping them deploy it. They don't have the time. And every time they go to do it, they get redeployed to something that's like going to get revenue tomorrow. Right. And it's like, even if they could do it, they don't have the time and the focus that it requires. Because the other thing I realized is like, we had to go from this, I'm going to build you one-off agents that do stuff, like Jackie's thing is a one-off agent, right? That's not the approach. The approach is, I need to get all your data into one place, create a brain, a repository of all your stuff that's set up to be searched by LLMs. And then I need you to build you a series of skills and agents on top of that. So you have to have this, you go from the center out, and you don't go individual slave. I mean, you can do it, It's just you're going to have all these little silo things that eventually you have to put together. And Rate.com he's a guy, Jason Lemkin, who was a venture capitalist and kind of built this media company around SaaS, software as a service products. He's been really on top of this transformation. And they started building agents a while ago. And he's realizing, oh, all the agents are starting to collapse into each other because they all use the same data. And so like really saying, oh, this database is here and that database, it's sort of like, no, they're all just the same group of data. It's just different views on it. And so that's what kind of made me realize like it's a comprehensive reformulation of your company. And so like, first of all, that's really hard. Second of all, you got to go like get a customer and make money tomorrow. And it's just hard to prioritize them.
This is going to leave our listeners more excited or more frightened, but it's a really interesting look, and I appreciate your taking the time. Alan Pentz is founder of Corner Alliance and owner RX, and now Rustproof. Thank you, Alan.
I appreciate it, Laurie. Thanks.
And special thanks to our sponsor. This episode was brought to you by Grasshopper Bank.